The race. You go to help, Frank. I go home. Frank looked at Kenji. You've got to be kidding. What, are you scared? A son's first duty is to his family. The way Kenji said it made Frank think of the Ten Commandments. It also made him think of his own mother. She would be worried. Oh. He started to argue, but Kenji was already climbing down the rope ladder. Frank looked back at the smoke-filled harbor. Sirens wailed from every direction. Wait up, Kenji, he called. They scrambled through the ferns and vines together. A police car soared past, sending a cloud of powdery white sand into their faces. Another police car followed, siren blasting, and then another. Come on, let's go, Frank shouted and started running up the road toward home. They slowed down near a house where the sound of a radio floated over the road. Do not panic, the announcer was saying. We repeat, there is no cause for panic. The Japanese attack appears to be over. Kenji and Frank looked at each other and grinned with relief. Wait! Someone just brought in a note. The radio voice went on. It says that a Japanese ship has landed at the north end of the island. If anyone knows more, please call the station. And remember, keep off the road so emergency vehicles can get through. The Glenn Miller Band came on. Frank and Kenji sang along as they walked away. Before they finished the first line, the song stopped. There is no Japanese ship, the radio speaker called out. Repeat, there is no ship. A listener with a good view of the north end called in. I guess all it is safe to say is that rumors are sweeping the island. Just remember, don't panic. We will bring you news as it breaks. And the band was back, playing a love song. 4 army trucks rushed by in a row, stirring up more sand. A blue car hurried after them, then took a turn and squealed down the school's driveway. Hey, wasn't that Mr. Marsh? Frank asked. Why would the principal go to school Sunday morning? Kenji wondered aloud. Let's go see, Frank said. It won't take much time, then we'll go right home. They turned into the driveway. Boys, am I ever glad to see you, called Mr. Marsh. This school is going to be used for emergency meetings today. We have to tape the windows. That way, if there's another bombing run, the glass won't break into splinters on the people inside. He held out 2 big rolls of tape. Here, Frank. He already knows my name, Frank thought happily. This is yours, George. Frank looked at Kenji. What would it be like to have 2 names? Frank was glad he knew Kenji's real name. Come on now, boys. Kenji wouldn't take the tape, and Frank didn't want to if Kenji didn't. He knew his mother would be worried, but she'd want him to obey the principal too, and they'd be doing something to help. He grabbed both rolls and handed one to Kenji. I'll race you, he teased. Let's start by the front door. I'll go after the windows to the left. You take the right. And we raced to the playground door in back. Kenji shook his head. No. Then we'll go home, I promise, Frank said. Kenji took the tape. Good, Mr. Marsh said. You can stand on those pineapple crates. I'll tape the second floor windows from inside. He ran and got pails of water for each of them. Ready? Set, Go! Frank grabbed his pineapple crate and set it up beside the building. He knew what to do. He had taped the windows at home in Maryland once when a hurricane was coming. He dipped the tape into water, then stretched up on his toes and stuck the end of the tape to one corner of the glass. Then he unrolled it to the far bottom corner, pressing it into place as he went. Then dip and up again to make a giant X. By the time he turned to the corner of the building, the motion had settled into a pattern. Dip, up, down, dip, up, down. Move over to the next window and dip again. He wondered how far Kenji had gotten. The long side of the building seemed to be going on forever. He tried to remember if there would be 2 or 3 windows left when the family turned the next corner. When his mind wandered, he saw the men blown off the deck of the Arizona, torpedoes churning through the water towards ships tied helplessly at anchor, flames burning on decks, on piers, on oil slicks. The water itself had seemed on fire. Frank tried to move even faster, to rip the memories out of as he ripped the tape off its roll. At least Kenji had been there to see it with him. It would have been too awful to watch the bombing alone. Kenji was fun to pal around with, Frank thought. At least until he found a real friend. Besides, Kenji wasn't so strange after all. He was just like anybody else on the baseball team back home. Almost. He began to whistle, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Finally, he rounded the corner and set his crate under the next to last window. "Hey, Howley, I'm out of tape," Kenji called from the top of his crate. "Let's see your fastball." He cupped his hands, squatted into a catcher's stance, and almost fell off the crate. Kenji laughed at himself. Frank hurled the tape squarely into his hands. "Nice catch," Frank called. "It would be great to be on a team with Kenji," he thought. They were finished in minutes. A block and a half from home, a police car stopped beside them. "You boys," the officer said. "Where are you going?" "Home," Frank answered. The officer looked closely at Kenji. "Who are you?" he demanded. "George Emoto, sir," Kenji answered. The policeman kept studying him. "I no live 2 blocks from here." "His daddy owns the house where we're staying," Frank put in. The officer wrote both of their names down and told them to hurry home. When they got to Frank's house, Kenji waved a quick goodbye and kept walking. "Mom, I'm home," Frank called as he opened the door. His mother darted out from the kitchen and grabbed him in a long, fierce hug. "Frank, oh my, Frank," she kept saying. When he could pull away, he saw she'd been crying. "I've been so scared. Your father waited so long as he could for you, but he was needed at the newspaper." She sighed. "They've attacked, Frank. While you were out playing, the Japanese bombed everything." "Not everything, Mom," Frank said. "Some of the ships are still floating." "How do you know this?" she asked sharply. "I saw it." Frank shook his head, trying to keep out the pictures. "Kenji and I watched it all. The bombs and the fires and the torpedoes. And, Mom, they hit the Maryland." "Attention, please." The radio voices burst out from the kitchen. "Private citizens are to prepare their homes for blackout conditions tonight. Stay tuned to this band for further announcements." And as suddenly as it had begun, the radio news was over. "We have to talk about tonight, Frank," Mrs. Hopkins said. He followed her to the kitchen. They called for all nurses to report to their nearest hospital to help with the wounded soldiers. She handed him a sandwich. "Are you going?" Of course, I have to do something to help. Frank smiled. He knew that feeling. Swell, he said, while she poured milk for him. He told about helping at the school on the way home. Then he told her about the policeman stopping them and writing down his name. Oh dear, his mother looked out the window. I wish you had found a safer friend. He knew what she meant. Safe and white. But there were only two other white kids in his class, and both of them were girls. All the rest were Japanese or Chinese or Korean or Hawaiian. Why couldn't his mother understand? That was how it was in Hawaii. Kenjimoto is just like me, Mom. You should see how he can catch. Well, I hope so, Franklin. It would fit right in with the plans your father made for you. She gave her white uniform a sharp tug. While I'm at the hospital, you'll be spending the night at the Emotos with Kenji.